Hey yo, welcome back. It's Ty Ty. You tired of your mixes sounding like trash? What you're hearing in the studio ain't what you're hearing in the car. Ain't what you're hearing in your AirPods, your Bluetooth speaker. Just not translating? If so, let's go ahead and take your mixes to the next level. So it's not all about gear. You know, you're not gonna find the magic plug-in. You're not gonna find the magic mic. None of that. You have to really figure out the ins and outs and really dig into it and know exactly what you're listening to, or you're just gonna end in an endless cycle of new gear, new gear, new gear, new gear. And you might get a little bump on one song, but then you go ahead and put it on another song and it sounds funky. And you know, at the end of the day, the goal is to have cohesive mixes across all speakers, all platforms. You want it to sound good. You don't want to be at the house party. Yo, turn on that new song, blah, blah, and then it sounds like dog shit. We've all been there. I've been there, and that actual specific situation happened to me. I'm like, bro, please turn this shit off. Like, it doesn't sound the way it sounds in the studio. So that really made me dig into it a lot deeper. But today I'm going to show you certain things to look for, certain things to focus on to really get your mixes to translate the way you want them to, and then that way you can be happy with them. So let's go ahead and dive in. I'll show you what we're working with. All right, so this is a track called Peasants. This will actually be out by the time this video drops out on all platforms if you want to go ahead and check it out. But let's go ahead and I'm going to turn off all my effects, turn off my high end there. And this is what it sounds like, the lead by itself.
Hear 'em screaming, they some kings, all I see is peasants. Bet you never seen a brick, barely move a feather. I was out here selling pills, never went to college. I was hanging with the shotters, kick it with the robbers.
Alright, so I can already tell that there's excessive low end, there's mud, it's very dull sounding, it doesn't sound polished by any means. It's a nice take, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done to it. And you know, I've said it in other videos too, but a good rule of thumb when it comes to tracking vocals, make sure you're a good distance away from the microphone. Like, kind of like this would be good. You know, you got your pop filter about right here, and then you can get up on that pop filter if you want to, because there's different certain things, like you can get real low with it, you know. Turn on that late night radio voice. But let's go ahead and start with one of my favorite personal tools. Let me go ahead and just duplicate this here. And shout out to HMD Rosetta EQ. This actually really helped me learn EQ a little more in and out. And I actually don't use it anymore. I still think it's a great tool, but if anything, for what is it, 40, 50 bucks, it's a great way to train your ears because everything's labeled. You know exactly what certain things sound like when you boost them or cut them. So let's go ahead and see here. So let's just go additive. So if we were to do too much warmth, you're gonna create some mud. So let's go ahead and check that out.
Hear 'em screaming, they some kings, all I see is peasants. Bet you never seen a brick.
So with that being said, you know, over here, because it's all a balance, you know, you can boost that if it's lacking in certain areas, but then watch here in the mud where you go to clean it up.
Hear 'em screaming, they some kings, all I see is peasants. Bet you never seen a brick, barely move a feather.
Notice the difference that makes just instantly. Now, I'm kind of getting out of order here, but what I would do always to start is my low cut.
Hear 'em screaming, they some kings, all I see is peasants. Bet you never seen a brick, barely move a feather.
Now, you don't want to cut off too much of the low end, you know. I'll pull up my, I don't have my fab filter on this one, but basically it's still a parametric EQ, you know, and this one I'm cutting at, let's see here, 120 hertz. And it does make a huge difference in that aspect. So then we'll just kind of go off of what this is showing here. So we got the low end cut. Then let's go ahead and cut out some mud, which would be in the around 200 to 500 range. And you'll just hear it come out.
Hear 'em screaming, they some kings, all I see is peasants. Bet you never seen a brick, barely move a feather. I was out here.
And you don't want to cut too much because then it'll start to get really thin. but you definitely want to make some good cuts there. If you don't, a lot of times you'll really notice that on some lower end speakers. But then go ahead and see here, there was some harshness in here too, which a lot of times, I'll cut out harshness and sibilance, and I'll cut up here in 3K range. But let's go ahead and just do it on the Rosetta, and we'll get to hear what it sounds like.
Hear 'em screaming, they some kings, all I see is peasants. Bet you never seen a brick, barely move a feather. I was out here selling pills, never went to college.
You notice instantly how much cleaner that's sounding. It's just more pleasing to the ear. It's not quite as harsh. So let's go ahead and de-essing. I'll pull this one up and close out this EQ. And basically what you can do here on like most de-essers, but this one specifically, you can sidechain and then just hear where it's sounding messed up. So actually I'm going to go ahead and pull that down here. Instead of doing that in the Rosetta, we'll go ahead and hear what it sounds like.
Hear 'em screaming, they some kings, all I see is peasants. Bet you never seen a brick, barely move a feather. I was out here selling pills, never went to college. I was hanging with the shotters, kick it with the robbers. Rock a gun like a watch, go nowhere without it. Think he hard and supreme, let me see your profits.
Definitely noticing some plosives right there in the 4100. Let's see. Maybe I'll just do it right there and then kind of zip some of this out.
Hear 'em screaming, they some kings, all I see is peasants. Bet you never seen a brick, barely move a feather. I was out here selling pills, never went to college. I was hanging with the shotters, kick it with the robbers. Rock a gun like a watch, go nowhere without it. Think he hard and supreme, let me see your profits.
That's a little bit better. Now, if we wanted to dig into it deeper, we could really take more out on that, but that's good for an example. And you can kind of bounce back and forth here on which one sounds best. A lot of times I like the little shelf there. And then before we move on any further, one good thing too, like I was saying with good recording and space from the mic, you really want to pay attention to your levels coming in. You don't want to come in too hot. A good rule of thumb is, coming in at about -18 to -13 dB when you're coming in. And that just is a nice safe spot. That way when you add your effects and everything, that'll bring your levels up a bit, but then you don't have to worry about clipping, none of that. So then that's kind of some big steps when it comes to EQ. As far as corrective EQ, I always corrective EQ or subtractive EQ before I really dive any deeper. You can see my chain here. I have that in other videos, but I'm not going to fully break that down at the moment. So the next step is compression. Compression is absolutely important in mixing. You want to control peaks, but you don't want to fully crush it or smother it. The R comp is always my first stage of compression, or just kind of compression in general. I try not to really crush it too much, but on this specific compressor, I like about a 2.6 ratio. Sometimes I go to like 2.49. And then I kind of have my attack and release set here to start. But my goal on this is to not have a crazy ratio, like a softer ratio, but then still taking off about 6 dB. So let's go ahead and see here real quick.
Hear 'em screaming, they some kings, all I see is peasants. Bet you never seen a brick, barely move a feather.
So that's going good there. And in order to get that, you're bringing down your threshold.
Hear 'em screaming, they some kings, all I see is peasants. Bet you never seen a brick, barely move a feather.
So that's a little less than it was, but I'm liking how that sounds. You can just start to tell that it's sounding a little more even. So we'll go with it bypassed so you can hear it, and then we'll go ahead and engage it.
Hear 'em screaming, they some kings, all I see is peasants. Bet you never seen a brick, barely move a feather. I was out here selling pills, never went to college. I was hanging with the shotters, kick it with the robbers.
So I'm liking that there. Now, granted, when you are compressing, you are losing volume, so you can always bump that back up with your gain. And a lot of times too, it does help to really set it in the mix by messing with your attack and release. You know, a faster release is going to make your vocals a lot more upfront, and you can kind of smooth them out by setting them to a slower release. So go ahead and check this real quick.
Hear 'em screaming, they some kings, all I see is peasants. Bet you never seen a brick, barely move a feather. I was out here selling pills.
So even with the beat off, you can tell that it is kind of just making it a bit smoother. But for this specific beat, I definitely liked it a little more punchy. Go ahead and play it with the beat real quick.
Hear 'em screaming, they some kings, all I see is peasants. Bet you never seen a brick, barely move a feather. I was out here selling pills, never went to college. I was hanging with the shotters, kicking with the robbers. Rock a gun like a watch, go nowhere without it.
So you definitely can tell that smoothed that out quite a bit there. So then moving on after that, one big thing to me is the vocals tucked in the beat. You know, you want it to sound one. You don't want it to sound like, man, that's just vocals slapped over a 2-track. Granted, that is what it is a lot of times, but you want to try to glue that in there and really make it one cohesive thing. You know, you don't want to see a painting on top of a painting. You want to look at that beautiful piece of art and admire it for the one piece that it is. Not like, man, that painting was beautiful, and then somebody came in, threw some tape over it or something, you know what I mean, over a section. So a good way to go about doing that is, let me go ahead and mute this here. So there's a couple things. One thing you can do is, in your EQ, let me go ahead and bring all these up here real quick. So one thing you can do with your EQ, in the 800 range, you can just kind of zip some out, and then that will tuck it. So that's one method. Let me get it here. Technically, I would do another EQ on this, but actually, that's already in the 800 range. So what I would specifically do is kind of tighten this Q up a little bit. Let's see.
Hear 'em screaming, they some kings, all I see is peasants. Bet you never seen a brick, barely.
So you notice how that's just noticeably sitting on top now? So let me go one more time.
Hear 'em screaming, they some kings, all I see is peasants. Bet you.
Now with it.
Hear 'em screaming, they some kings, all I see is peasants. Bet you never seen a brick, barely move a feather. I was out here selling pills, never went to college. I was hanging with the shotters, kicking with the robbers.
So that instantly sucked it back into the beat. So there's a couple other things that you can do. I run Soothe as a side chain, and basically what you do here is, so basically what you're doing here is you are bumping up in the mids. Got about 1K there and 2700 on that. And what that's doing is I am side chaining it to the beat. I didn't label this properly. So you want to set that to 0. So then you go into the top corner here, bus. Normally, like I said, it would be labeled properly, but then you just go ahead and then hit the side chain button here. You can turn that on and off. It'll be glowing when it's on. So let's go ahead and see real quick.
Hear 'em screaming, they some kings, all I see is peasants. Bet you never seen a brick, barely move a feather. I was out here selling pills, never went to college. I was hanging with the shotters, kicking with the robbers.
So you notice instantly how that just sucked it down in there? It works every single time, and I do this on most of my tracks, because most of the time I am running off 2 tracks. I need to get into making beats, but I haven't taken that step yet. Maybe one of these days, but I've definitely been contemplating it quite a bit. And then also one extremely important thing to getting a professional sounding mix is just not overdoing your effects. You know, if you're putting too many delays and things like that on your lead, it starts to make it all muddy and gets all clogged up. And it's just creating space and really leveling things out and layering it out properly. So there is certain things that you can do too. Let me see here. So down here on my, let's see. I actually got it engaged on this song. So what I got here is a compressor ran as a send that's in my delay send. So it's kind of a send within a send, but you want to sidechain it, and then you go up here and you hit your little tab and then pull up your proper SYN so you can go ahead and sidechain it. And basically what that's doing is it allows you to drive more delay onto your lead without making it all clogged. So let me go ahead and bypass this real quick.
Hear 'em screaming, they some kings, all I see is peasants. Bet you never seen a brick, barely move a feather.
So I don't even got to tell you, that sounds terrible. And I love my effects, my delays and everything, but it's learning how to do it in a professional, cohesive way that is pleasing to the ear. Because, you know, there's not really a right and wrong way to do things as long as it is pleasing to the ear. So then with it engaged.
Hear 'em screaming, they some kings, all I see is peasants. Bet you never seen a brick, barely move a feather. I was out here selling pills, never went to college. I was hanging with the shotters, kick it with the robbers. Rock a gun like a watch, go nowhere without it. Think he hard and supreme.
So personally, to me, I think I could actually drop the threshold down on this a little bit, because kind of rule of thumb, you know, you just want it to be pulling just enough. That way it's really just ducking it out of the way. Let's go ahead and try it one more time.
Hear 'em screaming, they some kings, all I see is peasants. Bet you never seen a brick, barely move a feather. I was out here selling pills, never went to college. I was hanging with the shotters, kick it with the robbers. Rock a gun like a watch.
So you can hear a big difference. I'll play it one more time with it.
Hear 'em screaming, they some kings, all I see is peasants. Bet you never seen a brick, barely move a feather. I was out here selling pills, never went to college.
So I'll play it with the beat.
Hear 'em screaming, they some kings, all I see is peasants. Bet you never seen a brick, barely move a feather.
And without it.
Hear 'em screaming, they some kings, all I see is peasants. Bet you never seen a brick, barely move a feather. I was out here selling pills, never went to college. I was hanging with the shotters, kick it with the robbers. Rock a gun like a watch.
So it definitely makes a big difference there. It can be a subtle thing, but you know, you can also push your delays a lot harder. And I didn't want mine to be super noticeable, but I definitely wanted that vibe. So that's kind of why I did it like that. I just made another video not too long ago about layering background vocals. So this was before that I had actually dug into this. I believe this song's technically, even though it's just now coming out, it's probably like a year old. And, you know, it's all about progress when it comes to being an artist and being an engineer. You want to keep stepping your game up. So I definitely do my backgrounds in a completely different way now. But what I got going on here is an auto pan. And basically, if I'm not mistaken, yeah, they are kind of set to different ratios. This one's a lot wider, you can see up here, than the other one. So they're just kind of moving around a lot. Let's see, did I have... Surprised that's all the background vocals I have on this. Well, I mean, it got the job done. I do a lot more layers now, and I just can't, you couldn't even really tell. It just makes the whole overall mix sound a lot thicker. But, you know, say you do 2 stacks of dubs. You don't want those to be in the center behind your lead. You want to push one out to the left, push it out to the right, and so on and so forth down the list. You know, kind of like Tizio was saying when he was on Audio Nerds, you want to kind of form a triangle. You know, you got your lead in the middle and you're bumping out as you go. So like each next stack that you do, you want to push it out a little wider, a little wider, a little wider. And, you know, it just kind of really pulls everything together in the end. And at the end of the day, the important thing is, you know, you're enjoying your craft, you're being able to express yourself, but we all want the quality to be the absolute best that it can be. So, you know, just take your time, really study the ins and outs if you want to really dive into compression for a couple days and figure out the ins and outs of why and why not with EQ, how and how not to, different vocal chains. A lot of times putting things in the right order really makes an overall difference in the final product. And, you know, we put a lot of time into our craft, and we want it to be the absolute best that it can be. You want to be proud when you pull it up Show it to your homies, your girl. Shoot, maybe you want to show it to your mom. You want to make mama proud. But I definitely hope this helps. I mean, there's a lot more that we could cover here, but that's about all we're going to get into for today. And if you do want to dig in deeper to my videos, I got a ton down below, and I got a lot more on the way. And as I always say, this is Ty. Let's build together, grow together. I'm going to catch you next week. Peace.